Hey everybody, today we've got a community poll recap. This is number 12. I've been doing this once a month for the past year. Maybe if there's enough demand and we want to change things up, we could try to maybe do something in the direction of a monthly live stream. We'll see what happens, but we've gotten a lot of new subscribers over the past few weeks. This video is just going to be on the community tab for this channel, and we're going to go over all the polls that are at least 1 month old. This is kind of the opposite of the coin flip and the spinner battles. There's nothing random about this. This is the cold hard data of what you guys think. So let's go through it and I'll try to provide some commentary. So the oldest question that was not in the previous video is, what is your opinion of the National Rifle Association? We've got 18% strongly support, 15 support, 17 neutral, 12 oppose, and 39 strongly oppose. So it looks like the NRA is at about a 33% approval rating, 51% disapprove, and we've got 66 comments on this one. That's great. There's usually a lot of people on both sides to every question. I do like to have almost all different views represented, and I know there's going to be a political divide on a lot of these questions. Democrats usually despise the NRA while Republicans embrace them, and I know there's a lot of different groups related to guns out there. I picked NRA because I think it's the most prominent. Personally, I'm not usually a big fan of most groups unless it's a very specific cause, but specific to the NRA, usually they are against any form of gun restrictions or background checks. I think they do find themselves on the wrong side of popular opinion with a couple of issues. And I don't mean 55% support. Usually universal background checks, that gets overwhelmingly bipartisan support, and there's a lot of other issues surrounding guns. Sometimes people express their support, but once you get down into the details, things could change. But in my opinion, the biggest reason to oppose them is going to be lobbying. I think most people would like to see less money in politics, so that kind of influence I'm opposed to, and I think that's probably the biggest reason behind that 39% that strongly oppose. Next question, what is your opinion of teachers' unions? 30% very favorable, 16 favorable, 14 neutral, 16 unfavorable, and 25 very unfavorable. This is another one where there's going to be different groups of educators. I tried to go broad and just say teachers' unions, and this one is kind of split. We've got 46% favorable, 41% unfavorable, and again, a lot of great comments. I think focusing on the labor side of the issue is going to be what's going to get the most support. I think opposition is going to come from local property tax increases, and like the NRA, any ties to political lobbying. One reason I'm going to have opposition is anytime the union wants to get between students and the parents, that I'm going to have a problem with. I also think there was way too much enthusiasm for mask mandates and school closures. And another thing I occasionally see in the news across many different school districts that is lowering any standards or scrapping any tests, usually in the name of diversity or inclusion. It might be changing discipline guidelines, doing away with standardized tests, or changing the entire grade structure in order to achieve a group-based outcome that I think is a complete loss for everybody. And you could go on and on about this. You could talk about teachers not getting paid. You could talk about how there's great teachers, how there's not so great teachers, how tenure could be an issue. Just like the guns, there's a lot there, but teachers' unions are polarizing. Usually what I see is Democrats love unions except for police unions. Republicans tend to do the opposite. Usually not a fan of unions except for the police and maybe the firefighters union. The next question, how many more rounds until a new speaker is elected? 2% said 1, 10% said 2 to 3, 18% 4 to 6, 12% 7 to 10, and the clear majority, 57%, thought it would go 11 or more rounds. This time the correct answer happened to only be 1. Somehow the Republicans got it together. Mike Johnson came out of nowhere and he got elected on the very next ballot. A lot of people thought it was going to drag on. That's what we saw earlier in the year. It seemed reasonable to think that it could go on a while. I thought it would at least go a few, but this goes to show you never know what's going to happen. Sometimes the past does not at all dictate the future. Next question, 2024 shift for president in Washington compared to its 19.2% Democrat margin in 2020. 15% think it's going to go toward the Democrats by 3 or more. 18% think it's going to go by 1 to 2.9. 26% think it's going to go less than 1% toward each side. 30% think it's going to go toward the GOP by 1 to 2.9. And 11% think toward the Republicans by 3 or more. This is kind of a split. Washington, it's a blue state. A lot of that blue vote, which is in King County and the surrounding suburbs. It doesn't look like they're going to be voting Republican anytime soon, but going nearly 20 points last time toward the Democrats, that is pretty significant. Am I open to it hitting 20 points next time for Biden? Yeah, I am open to it. I just think it is a little bit more likely that the Republicans could narrow that margin a little bit. Maybe it's only 1 point, and it does depend on the national environment, but I'm going to think this is going to tilt a little bit toward the Republicans. But you never know. Maybe it goes 24 points for Biden. maybe it gets down to 12.5 for Trump. Next question, bigger concern, offensive Halloween costumes or policing of Halloween costumes? 14% say offensive Halloween costumes, 30% are neutral or no opinion, 56% say policing of Halloween costumes. I spent a lot of time trying to think of the best wording. It's never going to be perfect. I think there could be a divide on which type of offensive we're talking about. I think if a costume was overly sexual, I think a lot of people would be against that. I don't see a lot of outcry over that particular side of it. The bigger outcry is the costume insensitive? You might hear cultural appropriation. That's the kind of stuff I always hear. Usually there's a list of which costumes to avoid or which race is allowed or not allowed to dress up in a certain attire, and maybe they have to understand the full history if they're going to do it. That I generally don't like. Of course, I think there's a point, like with almost anything, where you can take it too far, and a costume is going to be in such poor taste that I would say it's highly inappropriate. But I think the guidelines over the past 5 or 10 years on these things have gotten pretty much out of hand. I always hear, live the way you want to live. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. It seems like that's true unless you want to grab some maracas and put on a sombrero. There's always going to be people offended. The question is it reasonable? And in this case, I think it's usually unreasonable, because then you're also going to have people offended by what you're not allowed to dress up as. Then do we reverse it because they're offended? It just goes on and on. Halloween is supposed to be fun. For the most part, let's let people do what they're going to do. And I do think the bar for what's considered insensitive should be a lot higher than it seems to be. Next question. Who will win governor of Mississippi? 80% say Tate Reeves, 20% Brandon Presley. Tate Reeves did win it. It was not by a huge margin. It was about 3 points or so. Even though I thought he was weak, the lean of the state carried Reeves over the top. Maybe Presley tries again in the future, but overall an expected result in Mississippi. Next question. Who will win governor of Kentucky? 77% Andy Beshear, 23% Daniel Cameron. This was about a 5-point margin for Beshear. Cameron looked like he was closing the gap in the final couple of weeks, but with Beshear's popularity being as high as it was, it seemed unlikely he was going to lose. I had Beshear at about 4 points. 4 out of 5 of you got it correct, so not much unsurprising in Kentucky or Mississippi. The next question is, who will control the Virginia General Assembly? 46% say Democrat House and Senate. 3% say Democrat House and Republican Senate. 12% Republican House, Democrat Senate. 28% Republican House and Senate. 11% tie, not sure, no opinion. The correct answer is Democrat House and Senate. I thought it was going to be very close, and it was. They did get a bare minimum 1-seat majority. There's no shame if you thought Republicans were going to hold on to at least one of these. It seemed like the momentum might have been with the Democrats very slightly in the final couple days, and I did put this poll out right before the election, so some of these results might be after the election was over. Next question. Less than a year to go, who will win the 2024 presidential election? 51% Joe Biden, 40% Donald Trump, 9% someone else. And like with a lot of questions, it's pretty much a split. Right around that time is when a lot of polling started to come out, showing Trump with a lead in the popular vote as well as the key swing states. So I get it if you think Trump is going to win. If the election were right now, I think that would happen. Trying to guess 11 months out is incredibly difficult. I don't fault anybody for picking either side. My last prediction had Biden up. That could change. 9% do think it could be someone else. As of right now, I don't think the third-party vote is going to be strong enough, but hey, that could always change. Let's go to the last question. Chance Joe Manchin runs for president. 7% very likely, 15% likely, 35, 50-50, 26 unlikely, and 18% very unlikely. I asked this question after Manchin decided he's not going to run for re-election to the Senate in West Virginia. The speculation then becomes, is he going to run for no labels? We still don't know what he's going to do. If he does run for no labels, he might be the running mate and not at the top of the ticket. Either way, at this point, it doesn't look like no labels is going to have much of a chance. They could take a little bit away from Biden. That's why Democrats are against them. But will Manchin actually run? I tend to agree with these results and think that it's unlikely. I wouldn't put it past Manchin, though, to try to do one last move where he stays relevant. If that did happen, then it would all become about ballot access. But Manchin, he's already well into his 70s now. I think he should call it a career. I don't think he has much of a constituency, but you never know what somebody's going to do. And that wraps up another community poll recap. And I do appreciate all the votes and most of the comments. There's always going to be a couple that are just trying to troll. And sometimes, for whatever reason, YouTube just hides the comments. I don't Don't know why that is. Other than that, I read at least 90% of the comments. It's great that we're getting a lot of comments and a lot of votes now, but there's far too many for me to respond to. It's good to see some back and forth, different views expressed. Sometimes there's a split, sometimes there's a consensus. I try to be as fair as I can on the wording and the choices. You're never going to please everybody, but let me know in the comments. What do you think about these polls? Do you like the recap? Let me know down below. On your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.